The cranberry sauce hissed in little ruby bursts on the stove the morning my marriage cracked open, the sound small and cheerful enough to feel like a betrayal. I had woken at 5 the way my mother used to on holidays and moved about the kitchen with that sturdy, purposeful choreography women inherit like a surname. Sage butter, a pyramid of russet potatoes on a towel like sleeping stones. Our daughter Faith texted at 7:12. On my way, do you need wine? And I answered the way mothers do when they want to make things easy. Get something you like. Our son Hunter had arrived late the night before from Chicago, his suit jacket draped over the chair in the hallway, his shoes sitting obediently beneath like pets trained not to shed. I moved the turkey in its white roaring oven basting, praying silently for tenderness, for golden skin, for a day without edges. The house smelled like the past, like the Thanksgivings when I was a girl, and believed that effort could anchor a family. I laid out my grandmother's blue sprig china and ironed linen napkins until my wrists ached, arranged a cornucopia with small gourds and velvet leaves, and those battery candles that pretend to be flame. I fussed with angles until the table looked like the last photo in a magazine spread. If you can arrange something beautiful, you tell yourself, maybe it will behave. Taylor's phone was already restless by 9. It quickened whenever he walked past the doorway. Buzz buzz, a little animal begging for his attention. He glanced at it as if pulled by string eyes lit the way they used to light for me. Honey, can you help me with the turkey? I called, my hands sunk to the wrists in a mixing bowl of bread and onions and butter. The savory perfume of promise. In a minute, he said, thumbs moving. It wasn't unkind. It was worse than unkind, it was reflex. We had been married 23 years. You learn the shape of a person's reflexes. By noon, Faith tumbled through the door, cheeks flushed, hair wild from the wind, arms soldiering 3 bottles of Pinot Noir and a paper-wrapped baguette she had bought on a whim because it looked lonely on the shelf. She kissed my cheek, twirled once to show the dress she bought with her fellowship stipend, and set the wine on the counter like a benediction. Hunter followed with a sleepy grin and a bouquet so seasonally enormous, it made the kitchen feel like a florist's window. Watching them together, my heart did that private ache. Happiness makes the ache of knowing time is moving, and you can't keep it, only witness it. Taylor walked in, then all cologne and clean shirt and a smile that didn't quite reach me. The phone in his pocket trembled. He let it. We sat. There is a hush at a perfect holiday table. Not quiet, but the note and orchestra finds together, voices interweaving, plates clinking, the heavenly strain of first bites. Mom, this stuffing, Hunter said, already serving himself the way children revert to ritual. Faith lifted her glass. To the miracle worker who does this every year like it's easy. We clinked. My laugh sounded normal. I willed it to be. When the phone vibrated again, Taylor set his fork down and smoothed the napkin on his lap the way he always did before saying anything he had rehearsed. His legs started that small bounce beneath the table. He cleared his throat. These were his tells. I knew them the way you know the creaks in your own staircase. Everything okay, Dad? Faith asked. He didn't look at her. He stood too quickly. The chair legs scraped the floor and made a noise like a reprimand. I have something to tell everyone, he said in a voice he borrowed from boardrooms, the voice for reorganizations and pivots and hard decisions that happen to other people. The smell of sage went sharp in my nose. I felt absurdly that if I kept chewing one careful bite of sweet potato, a sip of water, the moment might pass around me like wind. I'm selling the house, he said, and for a second the sentence didn't understand itself. Holly and the kids need more space. Faith blinked as if she'd been slapped with light. Hunter's fork dropped against his plate, the bright ring of it too clean for the moment. Holly, Faith whispered, already knowing and still asking, an old childhood habit. My girlfriend Taylor said the word tidy and devastating and unimaginably casual in our dining room. 8 months now. She has 3 kids. Jack's 8, Joel's 6. Little Elise just turned 4. They need stability. There's a place in Westfield, 5 bedrooms, good schools. I thought of the child-sized toothbrush I had bought for Faith when she was 4, the strawberry toothpaste she hated the way she had insisted I sing the ABCs while she brushed. I thought of the number of rooms in our house by the seasons, how winter made the living room larger, how summer pushed us to the porch. I thought of the contract my body had made with time, the little burns on my wrists from ovens, the groove on my index finger, from a lifetime of peeling the lower back ache I woke with, because some loves you carry like furniture. I set my fork down with great care. What about us? Faith was staring at her father as if he had spoken in a language none of us knew. What about Mom? Finally, he looked at me, his eyes were bright and remote, a plane already mid-flight. I'm sure we can work everything out, he said. And I marvel now at the arrogance baked into a sentence like that. He thought the announcement was the mountain and the rest would be paperwork. I stood. The room tilted and then righted. I went to the kitchen and returned with my purse, the ordinary weight of it comforting against my palm. From it, I took a cream envelope addressed in my hand, the hand that had signed permission slips and Christmas tags, and the occasional note left on his pillow when life was kinder. I set it beside his plate, just where he had dripped gravy earlier. Since we're making announcements, I said, and sat down again. The calm in my voice surprised even me. It felt like a lake you find after a climb you didn't know you could survive. He stared at the envelope as if it might bite. What is it? Dad Hunter asked, but his eyes didn't leave his father's face. Taylor slid the envelope into his jacket pocket without opening it, relief and dread doing a strange dance in his expression. He reached for his water. His hand shook. The phone buzzed on the wood like a desperate insect. He turned it face down and reddened like a boy caught cheating. Work, he muttered. Faith looked at the clock on the wall like a prosecutor. On Thanksgiving. The phone buzzed again. He pressed his knee hard against the underside of the table until the candle flame wavered. Answer it, I said softly, and the soft was a blade. It astonished me that I could be both grieving and acquiring a new, almost scientific curiosity, like watching a specimen under glass. He declined the call, and something, the last illusion perhaps, gave way with a painless little click. I took another bite of turkey. I chewed. Chewing made me the most solid person at the table. Taylor, I asked lightly, because I had discovered that lightness could be violent. How long has Holly been helping you make decisions about our home? His fork clattered. Jordan. When then? I asked. After you've listed my dresser on Facebook Marketplace. After you've changed the locks. My voice didn't rise. I had spent months speaking to my own doubts this way. Calm, precise, practiced. Hunter stood, his napkin sliding to the floor like a small surrender. I've lost my appetite. He looked at his father the way a man looks at a portrait he realizes is a forgery. You decided your happiness was worth more than our family's dignity. He didn't shout. He just left, and the sound of his feet on the stairs was the sound a heart makes when it stops negotiating. Faith was trembling, but it was anger, not fear. Daddy, she said, and the old name made the room smaller. How could you? For a moment, Taylor's mouth softened, and I saw the man who had carried her on his shoulders at the county fair and taped her first watercolor to the refrigerator like a masterpiece. Then the phone lit up with Holly, and whatever softness had briefly visited disappeared. He answered in a low voice and turned toward the window, but her words were sharp enough to cross the room. She wanted timelines and guarantees. He had promised a house. He said, "There's a complication," and glanced at me as if I were the complication that had sprouted legs. When he hung up, we ate in silence, which was somehow louder. Faith's eyes were bright as if with fever. I need air, she said finally. She kissed my temple, that small, brief press children give their mothers when the ground tilts, and slipped outside. I took plates to the sink. I rinsed them. I stacked them just so. The sound of water on ceramic steadied me, the small domestic insistence of the life I had made and kept and kept and kept. That night, I locked the bedroom door to the room we had painted together in a color called Morning Shore, and I slept. It felt indecent to sleep with such completeness, but my body, exhausted from months of suspicion and rehearsed mercy, decided it would not ask permission from my mind. In the morning, the light came in blue and honest. The house was quiet as a church after the congregation has gone home and left the hymn hanging in the air. He had left early, I could hear absence the way you hear a refrigerator hum. I made coffee and sat with it like a friend. The steam rose in a patient thread. I watched it, and finally let myself remember. It had begun on a Tuesday in March, which I resented, because Tuesdays are not built for calamity. They are built for dry cleaning and carrots. He came home late, collar slanted, the exhaustion in his voice exaggerated like a costume. "Client dinner," he said. I warmed his plate and listened to a story I could have written myself. Traffic overcooked salmon, a joke about a partner who never knew when to stop talking. He showered right away, which he only did when he wanted to rinse something off himself that wasn't sweat. Small things. A pattern starts as a whisper. April took our plans exactly the way a thief takes jewelry. It left a draft where something precious had been. He missed our anniversary at the restaurant where he had proposed 24 years earlier. Emergency, he said. Crisis at work. He missed the Sunday matinee of the play Faith had begged to see with us for my birthday. Flight to Denver, he said. Can't be helped. He brought me a bouquet that smelled like the floral department at a grocery store, too sweet, too uniform, and kissed my forehead. And I told myself, marriage is tolerance dressed up as grace. Holly's name entered our house as workplace air common neutral helpful. Holly thinks we should restructure quarterlies. Holly suggested new software that will save hours. I pictured a woman with file folders and a sensible cardigan and nothing to do with the inside of our life. Then a photo appeared on his phone. I saw it because my battery was dead, and I needed to check the weather, not because I was hunting. There is a difference between suspicion and accident, and the heart keeps score. It was a group photo at an office party I had skipped because I was down with the kind of flu that knocks people into bed with humidifiers and childlike prayers. She was there, blonde and tidy, leaning just close enough to Taylor to read as a narrative in waiting. A second photo knocked the air out of me, a coffee shop, a pretty woman, 3 children. Her hand on his arm, her daughter on his lap, the caption an innocent Saturday sweetness. That Saturday, he had said he was golfing. I showed him. I asked gently because gentleness had always been my way of getting truth to come near without running. She's going through a divorce, he said, earnest and paternal. I'm helping. I wanted to believe him the way you want to sit back down in a chair that has already broken. I decided, as good wives often do, to absorb the doubt into chores. I folded it into laundry, sifted it into flour. But the phone began to ring at unholy hours. Her name became a rhythm even when he didn't answer. Voicemails stacked up. He spoke to her in a voice that was too low for words and too intimate for strangers. At Faith's graduation, he turned his phone face down and pretended not to see it, while the dean mispronounced our surname, and my eyes pricked with that stupid, proud sting. Afterward, in the car, he said, "She's having a hard time," as if the entire world were a hospital he needed to supervise. July carried confession by accident. Faith called to say she'd seen her father at the park by her apartment, with a woman and 3 kids, cute actually. She said he looked so natural pushing the little girl on the swing that she nearly went over to say hello and then didn't because it seemed intimate and holy and she suddenly felt like a trespasser. "Everything okay between you and Dad?" She asked, young enough to require reassurance and grown enough to deserve it. "Everything's fine." I lied, mother and protector and ghost. Once I stopped trying to win him back from whatever glitter he was chasing, a different energy arrived, the investigative calm of a woman who is done asking for explanations and ready to build a case. Patterns bloomed. Receipts told stories. A joint credit card I did not know about told a bigger one. Children's Tylenol, character Band-Aids, a small pink cake with a name piped in frosting I had never said aloud. The first time I saw the line Mr. and Mrs. T. Davidson on a piece of mail that wasn't mine, something inside me turned to glass. Flickers of fury lit it from within like storm lanterns. Clayton Richards's office smelled like leather and settlement. He had the calm of men who watch chaos professionally and send invoices for it. I brought him evidence in a tidy folder because I wanted the universe to know I too could be tidy. "Are you sure you want to proceed this way?" he asked, which is a polite way of saying, "This will not be pretty." "I need to protect myself and my children," I said. and discovered I meant it all the way down past the places where the marriage had once told me what to feel. And so a cream envelope appeared in our house and waited in my purse like a future with stamps on it. It waited while he missed our rescheduled anniversary for a crisis that had a woman's first name. It waited while I ate at the table for two alone and let the waiter pretend with me. It waited while I walked around the neighborhood afterward and didn't cry because sometimes dignity is a harder kind of grief that doesn't leak. It waited while I set the table with the blue sprigged china and buttered the green beans and trusted my hands to do what they have always done when my heart couldn't make a range carry serve. And when he stood that Thanksgiving and told our children about a house with 5 bedrooms and a yard and a swing set that wasn't theirs, the envelope stepped into the light. The envelope sealed in cream, and Patience waited months for this morning to arrive. Taylor came down the stairs like a man headed toward his own headline, the envelope pinched between trembling fingers. His eyes were hollowed by sleeplessness. His shirt unbuttoned at the collar looked like an afterthought. "Jordan," he said the word brittle as old paper. "What is this?" I flipped the pancakes. The spatula hissed against butter and I didn't turn around. "Open it," I said, and the sound of tearing paper filled the kitchen louder than the pan, louder than his breath. He read, "The rustle of legal documents carries a peculiar authority. You can hear futures rearranging themselves inside it. You transferred the deed." His voice cracked on the word deed, as if the syllable itself was disbelief. I turned finally to look at him. "3 months ago," I said, "while you were busy drafting a different kind of future. You set me up." I protected myself. He looked at the papers again, hunting for a loophole that wasn't there. "You can't do this," he said. "I already did." His phone began to buzz again. The name Holly flashed bright and relentless on the screen. He hesitated. I smiled. "Go on," I said. "She's probably calling about her house." He answered, "Hey, babe." Her voice was so sharp I could hear every word. "The kids are picking out paint colors. When will we have the keys?" He swallowed. "There's been a complication." The pause that followed could have been measured in earthquakes. "What kind of complication?" "Well," he said slowly, "the house isn't technically in my name anymore." "What do you mean it's not in your name?" she demanded. "It turns out Jordan transferred the deed." On the other end, silence gathered itself like a storm, and then her voice returned, no longer sharp, but cutting. "You promised me security. You promised my kids a home. You're just another liar." When the line went dead, he looked up dazed. She hung up. "Shocking," I said. "Who could have guessed that a woman interested in your stability might reconsider when you lose it?" He stared at me, all bluster gone. 23 years, he said, his voice thin as smoke. "You've destroyed everything with a few pieces of paper." I destroyed it. I set down the spatula. "You stood in our dining room in front of our children and announced you were selling our home for your girlfriend's convenience. Don't mistake my reaction for the cause." He didn't answer. The buzzing of the refrigerator was suddenly deafening. He tried to call Hunter that afternoon. I listened from the living room, his voice low and pleading. Hunter's reply, when it came, was loud enough for me to hear from the doorway. "You made your choice at Thanksgiving, Dad. We've made ours." The line went dead. Faith answered the second call. "Don't call me again," she said, "until you're ready to apologize to Mom and mean it." By Saturday, the air in the house felt new. I brewed coffee, wiped down counters, and called it peace. I hosted my book club that morning, 8 women, croissants, laughter like windows opening. Margaret leaned close, eyes bright. "You look younger," she said. "What's your secret?" "Breathing," I said, finally remembering how. The divorce papers arrived 2 months later, courier delivered with an envelope thick enough to sound expensive. I signed the receipt with steady hands. He had filed first, his last attempt to script the story. Clayton smiled when I told him. "Let him feel in control," he said. "You're already miles ahead." I set the papers on the counter and went back to my garden. The winter air bit my skin, but the earth was soft beneath the frost. I turned the soil bare-handed the way my grandmother taught me. Starting over has a texture cold, damp, oddly forgiving. Months folded into one another. Taylor moved into a small apartment with a leaking faucet and an empty calendar. I heard through Faith that Holly had given him an ultimatum: prove you can provide or we're done. He promised her everything again. In April, Faith called. Her voice crackled with disbelief. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. Dad's getting remarried." "To Holly." in June. I almost laughed. Remarried already. Apparently she forgave him. They're talking about having a baby. A baby. At 51. I pictured him red-eyed and desperate chasing diapers he once resented. Are you invited? Faith snorted. Hunter and I both are. He sent formal invitations. Hunter threw his away. I might go, just for the show. After the call, I sat in my garden again, the air smelling of wet grass and mockery. The thought came unbidden. She's 32, he's 51. Why the rush to have a baby? The answer arrived one afternoon in the grocery store, disguised as coincidence. I saw Holly in the pharmacy aisle whispering furiously into her phone. I ducked behind the vitamin shelf. The custody agreement requires it, she hissed. If I want to relocate, my ex needs proof my new husband can provide for more children. The lawyer said fertility evidence helps the case. I felt the ground tilt slightly under my shoes. Fertility evidence, proof. That night I made a call I hadn't planned to make in years. Dr. Martinez, I said. It's Jordan Davidson. I have a question about my husband's medical history. A pause. Jordan, you know I can't disclose that. Of course, I said. But hypothetically, if someone requested an old fertility test result, would it still be on file? Hypothetically, he said, carefully records are kept for 30 years, and hypothetically they can be subpoenaed during a legal proceeding. The next morning, Clayton received my message. Add it to Discovery, I said. When the results surfaced, they were almost poetic. 24 years ago, after Faith's birth, Taylor had been tested. The results severely compromised fertility, nearly impossible without medical intervention. He had never told me. Let me believe the fault was mine. And now he was about to promise a woman her fourth child. The timing was divine. Holly's custody hearing was scheduled for the Monday after their wedding. Clayton arranged for the records to be delivered legally correctly on the wedding morning itself. That Saturday, I was pruning roses when my phone rang. Faith's laughter spilled through the line. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Try me. The wedding's off. Holly found out Dad can't have kids. Someone sent over medical records right before the ceremony. She read them while getting her hair done. By the time Dad showed up, she and the kids were gone. I leaned against the porch railing, feeling sunlight slide across my face. That's unfortunate, I said. Mom, she said, suspicious and amused. You wouldn't happen to know anything about those records, would you? Your father's medical history, I said truthfully, is his own business. That night, Hunter and Faith came over. We sat on the porch watching the sky bruise into gold. We didn't talk about Taylor much. We didn't need to. The silence was the piece of a story that no longer needed to be retold. He was somewhere across town, probably sitting in an empty banquet hall, surrounded by untouched centerpieces, listening to the echo of his own mistakes. Sometimes karma takes its time. Sometimes when it finally arrives, it's dressed as paperwork. Autumn came back around quietly, the way forgiveness sometimes does. Unannounced, unhurried, uncertain whether it's welcome. The leaves outside turned the color of rust and honey. The house that used to echo with absence began to sound like life again. It had been nearly a year since that Thanksgiving. I could measure the distance not just in months, but in the texture of my mornings, the steadiness of the kettle's whistle, the unhurried pour of coffee into my favorite chipped mug, the sunlight that found the kitchen tiles just so. There was no longer a waiting for footsteps on the stairs, no vibration of a phone I pretended not to hear. Silence, I had learned, could be a kind of music when it belonged only to you. Hunter called first with the news and engagement. He and Sarah had been together 2 years, long enough for me to know she was steady where he was impulsive, kind where he was proud. We're having a party in November, he said, voice warm through the line. Country club, same one where Dad taught me to swim. It was the kind of symmetry that made my heart both ache and glow. You're sure about this? I asked, teasing. Absolutely, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, the sort that made a mother remember every scraped knee and science project and sleepless fever that had led to this grown man's certainty. And Mom, I want you to come early. Sarah wants your help choosing flowers. Faith called next, breathless from the Seattle wind, to tell me she'd been offered a position at an environmental law firm that had only ever taken the top of her class. They said I remind them of you, she said. Too stubborn to quit once I've decided something matters. I laughed. Then they're right. Don't ever apologize for that kind of stubbornness. And so the life I thought he'd stolen began to rebuild itself, brick by quiet brick, painted with laughter and late-night calls and recipes shared across time zones. The house changed too. I painted the living room a pale green that looked like dawn after rain. I took down the framed photos where he and I were frozen in an old version of joy, and I replaced them with the children, Faith laughing mid-sentence, Hunter holding Sarah's hand, and a candid photo of the three of us at the beach last summer, sand on our knees and wind in our hair. I didn't frame those for symmetry. I framed them for proof. Taylor hadn't been part of these renovations, though his shadow lingered in small, unimportant ways, a mark on the stair railing where he used to tap his ring, a dent in the armchair he'd claimed for years. But even those ghosts were soft now. I didn't hate them. They were just traces of a story that had concluded. Faith called one night, her tone careful. "Mom, have you talked to Dad lately?" "No," I said, stirring my tea. "Should I have—" "I think he's struggling," she said gently. "He lost his job. Some kind of restructuring, he said, but I think it's more than that. And Holly." She moved on, I finished. "Yeah," Faith sighed. "With someone new. Arizona, I think. She didn't leave a forwarding address." I didn't say it, but the words "of course she did" hovered unspoken. The woman who'd built her life on promises would always move toward the next one. When the engagement party arrived that November, the air had that crisp sweetness that makes you believe anything is possible. I wore a navy dress, not black, not somber, but confident, and the pearl earrings my mother had left me. As I drove to the country club, windows down, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. My face looked rested. My eyes weren't waiting for anything. The ballroom glittered with soft gold light. Hunter stood at the center, radiant in his charcoal suit, Sarah beside him in champagne-colored silk. Faith waved from across the room, her smile wide and proud. And then I saw him, Taylor, standing in the doorway, uncertain, holding his hands clasped as though he didn't know where to put them. He had aged, not dramatically, but truthfully, the kind of aging that comes from losing your own narrative. His hair was more gray, his posture smaller. He spotted me almost immediately. Our eyes met for the first time in nearly a year. He hesitated before walking over. "Jordan," he said softly. "You look well." "I am," I said simply. "You—" He let out a small breath that might have been a laugh, might have been a confession, trying. We stood like that for a few seconds. Two people who once shared a bed, now sharing the polite distance of strangers who remember each other too well. Then Hunter appeared beside us, smiling tentatively. "Mom, Dad, I'm glad you both came. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't erasure. But it was something, the first fragile thread of rebuilding, woven not by me, but by our children." Later that evening, I stepped outside to the terrace overlooking the golf course. The air was cold, the stars crisp. I leaned on the railing, watching my breath dissolve into the dark. "Do you mind if I join you?" a voice said behind me. Clayton Richards stood there, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. The man who had helped me navigate the battlefield of my marriage looked strangely at ease in this gentle place. "I thought lawyers didn't attend family events," I teased. "I make exceptions for clients who survive wars with their dignity intact," he said, handing me a glass. We stood in silence for a while, watching the lights shimmer on the pond. Inside, laughter rippled through the glass. Hunter and Sarah were cutting their cake. Faith was taking pictures, her cheeks flushed from champagne. Taylor stood a few feet away, talking with another couple, unsure but trying. "How are you really?" Clayton asked. "Better than I thought I'd ever be," I said. "Not perfect, but peaceful." He smiled. "You've earned that." I thought of the woman I had been, the one who mashed potatoes by hand at dawn, who folded napkins to hide the tremor in her fingers, who believed she could keep love alive through sheer endurance. And then I thought of the woman standing here now, unafraid of quiet, certain of her own footing. Sometimes revenge doesn't arrive as fire or fury. Sometimes it arrives as freedom, the moment you no longer need to win. I looked back through the window at my children, at the life still blooming, and felt that steady hum in my chest that used to be sorrow and now was simply presence. "I think," I said, turning to Clayton with a soft smile that I finally stopped waiting for the apology. The stars were kind that night. The past felt small enough to carry. If this story moved you, if you found a little of your own strength in mine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you most, the quiet power of the envelope or the peace that came after. Sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding a life so whole it no longer needs one.